once again, continuing with stuff in the county, area 3 and 4, it was summer and it was 72. And Trey Reich was my unit assistant. He was a great guy and great unit assistant. He's one of the happiest individuals you'd ever seen. He's just a super guy, always upbeat and good swimmer and everything. And we're checking out the unit behind Lifeguard headquarters about 7:45 in the morning, getting ready to go north. Is 5640, and somebody runs out the locker room door and yells, "There's a diver down at Monarch Bay, 927D, drowning." So we're just about ready to go anyway. So boom, we get into the Jeep, we light it up. We're code 3 as we're starting to leave, and here's Gary Fredericks, walking across from his car to the Lifeguard headquarters to go to his tower. I get on the Jeep. So he immediately gets on the Jeep, and we roar out of Lifeguard headquarters and up Del Mar, turn left, and we're going code 3 down PCH. We pass, which I'll explain later why I'm telling you this part, but there was a Daily Pilot, was a newspaper in town, and we passed their office, and I don't see anybody, but we go past their office and we're really moving. And we proceed to go down North San Clemente and on PCH. We get down to the Y there where Capo Beach is now, and they just had put in the new overpass and the big turnaround. Well, I wasn't going to go that way because it was going to cost us another minute and a half. And so what I did is I turned left where the southbound traffic comes underneath the railroad bridge, and there's a long tunnel there, and of course it's one way. Well, we go the opposite way and we go right into the thank goodness the non-existent traffic, and we're code 3, and the sirens re-vibrating off the cement walls, and we get up and we're passing Doheny now, and there was no fences or other obstructions, so we get back on PCH. We've saved all the time that went to go around the on-ramp. And I think from Lifeguard headquarters to Monarch Bay, I think it was somewhere between 10 and 11 minutes. It was exceedingly fast, especially in a Jeep. And I look back now and think, Gary Fredericks must have been just terrified. But obviously he never let go of the bar on the back of the Jeep, and he was on the step bumper when we got there, so it was a success. But we go through Salt Creek, and we can see that there's about a 28 or 30-foot cabin cruiser in the far cove, way north of Tower 20, about a third of a mile, I think that is, maybe a little more. And there's all the breakwater-sized rocks that are at the base of the cliff there. It's like Dana Point Harbor breakwater rocks to protect the cliff. And we can see some activity there on the beach, and we can see people waving on the stern of the cabin cruiser. So I call for 54 Dana to send a Harbor Department boat up there to find out what's going on. I order an ambulance to the parking lot at Monarch Bay, and we're still driving towards where we're going to let Trey out. So Trey gets out at the base of the rocks, and he goes with the resuscitator, and he starts running the whole distance. He's carrying the resuscitator with the oxygen bottle and all. And so Gary and I I decide that we're going to go up through Monarch Bay, and we're going to get to the cliff above the scene. So we split, our response, and we get up there, and we're in the lot. And there happened to be one open lot, and it was there was a cliff right below it, and the lot, and it went down to the scene. And so we pull up, we advise what we're doing, and get out of the Jeep, and we're grabbing the foldable stretcher, the extra oxygen bottle, all the stuff we need. And who pulls up but the reporter from the Daily Pilot? How he got into Monarch Bay, I don't know. Well, in a way I do, because when we came out from the beach up into Monarch Bay, the gate guard was so slow to respond, I drove right through the parking arm and just snapped it right off. And so that meant the roadway was open, and that's probably what he did, is he just drove right past the gate guard. But somehow he found us in this residential area. And John Valterza was a reporter. He comes up, and I hand him a bunch of stuff. I said, "Here, you take this, and we need your help." So all three of us go over the cliff, and there's a meager path at best. And so we're literally running down the face of this cliff, and we get to the scene, and here's this guy, and they're working on CPR. Trey just gets here just as we arrive, and we get the guy up on the stretcher. And we continue the CPR, and I'm trying to decide whether we should either try to get a helicopter, take him up the cliff, go along the rocks. I mean, this is all going through my mind. And about that point in time, Hank Barnes and Dave Vick, two off-duty lifeguards, show up. Hank was, my immediate superior, and they were going to go diving in that same general area. So what had happened was this diver and his partner, and they were both off-duty Garden Grove police officers, they had a boat and they had hopped off the boat and to go diving in about 15, 20 feet of water. This one diver had had some type of a stroke or epileptic seizure or something, and his partner, a guy named Betancourt, said that it was clear enough that he could see him, the mouthpiece drop out of his mouth, and he just kind of sank to the bottom. And he said he went over and got rid of his weight belt, and he had dual tanks, and they got him to the surface, and somehow he got him to the beach by himself, and they started CPR, and he was screaming for help, and that's the people up above had been originally called in the call. So Hank says, what can we do to help you? And I said, I don't know. I said, I don't think the guy's alive, but we can't stop, And so we get him up and we start now carrying him along these breakwater angled rocks that are, probably 10, 12 feet high. And it's like going on the angled portion of the Dana Harbor breakwater, and we're doing CPR at the same time. And I don't really have a recollection of how long it took us to get from the Cove Beach to the thing, but we get to the parking lot and we start to load him in the ambulance. By now, somehow the chief is there. It was kind of like, oh, the chief's here. And he was standing at the back of the door. And so we put the guy in. Trey hops into the ambulance because we're going with him. And here is this guy's partner who's done just a phenomenal job to get his friend off the bottom of the ocean into the beach and start CPR on him all the time, calling for help. I mean, just done a magnificent job. And he is standing there at the end of the ambulance. I said, get in, you're going with us. And, he didn't hesitate, he got in. And that was so against policy, but, the chief never said a word. And I felt the guy had earned the right to go. It was his partner, obviously his friend. And he got in the ambulance and I got in and we started CPR again. And the ambulance roars out of Monarch Bay and we get to South Coast Hospital, get him into the ER, into the bed, and his wetsuit's off of him in a heartbeat. They're slicing it and they're injecting him with this huge syringe. I mean, it must have been this big around and that long of adrenaline right into the heart. And they decide to shock him because they can't get him, nothing's happening. And they take this guy that's 6'2", 230, and they paddle him and he snaps, with arms flung, and he literally comes up off the gurney, about this far. They go to another power and they snap him again. He does the same thing, just, and Trey and I are standing back, we're watching this, and they're doing everything they can to resuscitate him. And they hit him a third time and it doesn't work. The doctor looks up the clock, he says, it's 9:10 a.m., he's DOA, get him out of here. And so the whole thing comes to a halt, and, Trey and I are just kind of standing there like, this is really surreal, We've gone from Lifeguard headquarters, we've made a code 3 run, we've gone over a cliff, he's gone along the breakwater, we've done everything we can to resuscitate him, we got vomit all over us and body fluids, and the guy's dead, and it just, it was like it wasn't happening, but of course it was. And I wasn't upset in many ways about the guy who had died, because I knew that we had done every single possible thing we could do to save this guy. And from that day till this day, that's what I hang on to, because number one, it's the truth. And number two, Phil and I discussed it the next day, but we're standing there and they take the body out, and this really nice nurse comes up. She gives Trey and I some mouthwash and a brand new toothbrush with toothpaste on it. And we, clean ourselves up. And about that time she comes back and she says, the coroner's on the phone for you. And now it's really coming home. We've watched the guy, we've been with him for about an hour or maybe a little more. And now I'm talking to the coroner, and he wants to know what's happened. And I explained the whole thing to him, and the tanks were impounded. They're in the chief lifeguard's vehicle. And, we walk, I call headquarters and tell them that, what's happened. And we walk out through the emergency room, and somebody had brought 5640 and parked it out there. And so we got into the Jeep and we just went back to work, and had a, shall we say, a normal day, if you want to call it that. But it weighed on us, but we never really talked about it. I've said before, we never really talked about any of these events, and we didn't talk about that. Well, the next day, I go to work and it's about 7:30, and Phil was back on duty that day, and one of the guys comes out and he says, Lieutenant, the captain wants to see you. And I said, well, tell him we're almost done. He says, no, he said you'd say that. He wants to see you now. So I walked into Phil's office, and there was Hank, and he's back on duty, and there's Phil, and they're talking, and I come in. He says, close the door, Steve. So I close the door, and he says, looks at me, he says, I want you to know, he says, after talking to the Hank and reading your reports, because I'd stayed there till 10 o'clock that night after duty and filled out all the reports. He says, I want you to know that you did everything right, you know? And he says, sometimes that's just the way it is, you know? And I thought back, the first time I ever met Phil Stubbs, it was 1965. I was 15 down at Riviera Beach, and I didn't really meet him like, hi, I'm Steve Pro, but he was working for the city, and there had been a diver drowning at Seal Rock, and they had brought the body into the beach and brought it, and they were in the tunnel at Riviera Beach, and we were coming down the stairs to go to the beach, and Phil walked up to us, and they had the gurney in there, and they were transferring the diver's body to the gurney. And Phil just said to me, he says, you know, why don't you guys just wait out here? You really don't want to see this. You know, and I kind of flashed on that, you know, and but he said to me, I want you to know that you did everything right, you know. And he said, do you need some counseling? And I said, no. I said, I really don't, because I know that, you know, what we did. I mean, I went the wrong way down the one-way road at the railroad trestle, you know, going 70 miles an hour. And, you know, we went over a cliff to get him. We did everything we could possibly physically do. Wow. But that's always stuck with me. And Trey and I have never talked about it. I don't know whether, you know, he thinks like that. And I rarely think about it. But
I'll talk to Trey.
Yeah, this is part of the series of, you know, it kind of comes up because we're doing this series. Right. But I'll tell you, the one thing it did do was it made me even more aware to really be observant, really, you know, really watch your water, really do all the things you're supposed to do, because in the end result, that's the only thing that really saved me mentally from this guy dying on my call, was that we had done everything right. Right. You know, so.
Okay, that